Right, so we'll spend some time doing HTTP server number 2. We'll take a break, and then we'll go over JavaScript within the confines of front end. So I see that 4 people, one of them is me, finished HTTP server 2, so I'm guessing that most people did not finish this. I will admit that I did go through this yesterday. I was like, most of it is kind of written out fairly well, but some of it is definitely needs a little bit of clarification. So Josh and I are going to go back through HTTP server 1 and 2 and change a few things. And then as you'll see today in your curriculum, we've removed HTTP server number 3, and we're going to push that off until tomorrow because we want to be able to rewrite that before you get started. So we've moved HTTP server 3 to tomorrow the 11th, so that you don't have to go through a bad write-up. All right. HTTP server 1, 2, and 3 are to teach you the concepts behind the HTTP servers, but more importantly, it is to get you ready for Django, which is coming next week. We're starting to deal with a lot more files, a lot more classes than previously, and we're going to need to start to organize them in a particular manner. The way that we organize it is going to very heavily resemble what Django or how Django organizes things. So I think Django by default, when we just generate it off the bat, has like 56 files or something like that, and like 14 folders, because it just gives you a lot of stuff that you may or may not need to alter yourself, but it just gives you all of that right off the bat. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So I've cloned down HTTP server 2 with a request and a server, just 2 files right over here. And if you haven't realized this by now, the next day's challenges includes the previous day's answers. So request and server are both finished on HTTP server 2. That's the finished version of HTTP server number 1. So if we take a look at what we've got here, I've just cloned it down. I have 2 things side by side. Is this sizing okay, or is this too small? Good, all right. So I've got a request and I've got a server over here. Let me just flip it real quick. Split to the right. Put it over here. So just to reiterate, we're bringing in the socket library and the datetime library, both from the Python main library. And then from request, which is the name of the file, this one right over here, I'm importing the request class. I've got a method called build_HTML_response, which takes in some sort of body, throws it inside of an HTML body, and then I return a formatted HTTP response with the headers of the, this is the protocol, this is the version, this is the status code, and the reason phrase, and all of that. I create a server, bind it to localhost 9291 or 9292, or you can change this port to any number that you wish. Localhost just meaning your particular machine. And then while this is true, I'm going to listen for a connection, get the connection from the server, parse through the request that came in, and basically see if the request's URI is equal to /, I'm going to send them to the hello world version of this. Otherwise, if it equals time, I'm going to send them to we're going to build an HTML response with this particular date time. Let's just run this. So ls python server.py. And right now, the server is running even though nothing is happening right over here. We're stuck here on line number 13. Jumping over, localhost 9291. And I just have the /. There's that hello world we were talking about a little earlier. And then /time will give us the current time, which is this gross object right here. We're going to continue building on that, and we're going to be learning a lot of concepts that are going to help us out with Django next week, so it's not the first time that we're seeing everything. So right now, all we're doing is we're returning hard-coded responses, and that's not very useful. And generating HTML is a bit of a chore, because imagine if you had to write the HTML for every single response that you want, and you just hard-coded it like this. It would be very, very difficult. Luckily, there's something called Jinja with Python that basically generates HTML templates for you, but you can also interpolate Python variables. Let's take a look at something. Actually, no, that's all I need to say. So there's a Python library called Jinja, which is used for templating. So it's going to generate HTML templates for you, and you can interpolate Python variables inside of there. You can take a look at the introduction to Jinja if you want to, but you don't really need to. So yes, it says it allows us to write HTML and interpolate Python code. It's going to look a little something like this. But before then, we want to install Jinja 2 in our terminal and get us started. So I'm just going to close this one out, clear the screen. And within here, I want to install the Python Jinja application. So how do I do that? Because I saw a bunch of people trying to do pip install Jinja, and it was immediately broke.
I had to go to a
Yeah, let's just make a virtual environment. So I'm going to do Python
But why
dash
did I
M.
have to? Because I don't know.
Sure. So when we installed Python, you may have run, essentially what a virtual environment gives you is like a fresh start to install whatever you want that won't affect the rest of your system, and the rest of your system won't affect that. When we do that, you should most of the time have the ability just to install things without much of an issue. But when you install Python like packages inside of your machine may have conflicting versions of that already installed, or you may have installed something else that had a conflicting version with the thing that you're trying to install. It's like saying I want to build a car, and I have an empty, like when I lift up the hood, it's completely empty. That's what a virtual environment gives you, and you can put whatever you want at that particular point. Versus I want to build a car, but when I lift up the hood, there's a bunch of stuff already inside the hood. So it's harder to work within if it's an empty hood versus there's already stuff inside of there.
But it didn't have to install the virtual environment. So where does it cut off, I guess? Like, it takes something because it didn't have to install Python or any other stuff.
Yeah, it makes a virtual environment with just Python inside of it. That's it.
Oh, because
So
I wrote
just-
Python at the beginning?
Yep. Yeah, it's just that particular version of Python.
How do you know if we should be importing date, time, or decimal, or float at the very top? Because I noticed that you know a lot of them off the top of your head, but for me, I would have thought I could do something like just working with decimals without importing or doing any of that stuff, or
Sure.
now I have to import the other one, Jinja,
Yep.
or whatever we're going to be importing next. But how do you kind of know when you have to import, I guess, a third-party library? Is that what you're calling it?
Sure. So Socket and Datetime are two libraries that are built into Python.
Right.
They're available to you right away, but they won't automatically be imported unless you need them. So my thought process here is if I need something and it's not built into the Python library without importing it, I'm going to need to import it. So the socket library, I'm calling socket down over here. This doesn't exist on its own without the import statement on line 1. I'm also using datetime here on line 19, and that doesn't exist without line 2.
But how would you know you couldn't do any of that without importing the socket or the datetime? Like, why isn't it just kind of standard that I can just start typing?
I know what you're saying. That one, unfortunately, is just the way Python works. So the idea is, like, if you want to try to, so the way that I would solve that particular issue is start trying to write code, and it'll tell you if you're wrong.
Okay.
And at that point, you would most likely need to import things.
Yeah,
So-
I thought decimal was already.
That's what I thought too, but it's unfortunately not the case. Or this, basically, you always want to be more explicit than it's. So Python and JavaScript, and especially Django and React, the frameworks for those two languages, are very, very declarative. You need to import a lot of stuff at the top of the file versus something like a language like Ruby, where it's like, we'll import everything, which is, very convenient for you, but very, very like heavy duty. Like, you don't need to bring in everything. You only need to bring in exactly what you need. That's the idea here.
Question?
Yes?
Does that mean that with JavaScript we can do like node size based on the virtual environment? You can do node dash n virtual environment.
So Node doesn't have a virtual environment.
But how do you do JavaScript?
You don't have a JavaScript virtual environment.
You can't.
No. So Python's nice in the sense that they give you the opportunity to do a virtual environment, but it's the only language that I've seen that uses a virtual environment. Node will just install everything on your computer. It'll actually, the equivalent of like a virtual environment in Node is going to be package.json, which is like, we'll get to that when we get there.
I was going to say there are third-party virtual environments for JavaScript.
I haven't used them, if there are. All right, so I'm going to create this virtual environment. And you can see there's that virtual environment folder that was just created. So I did python-m, which is for make. Hey, Python, make a virtual environment called virtual environment. This thing right here. And I'm going to activate it by running source vem bin activate. And you know that you have an active virtual environment because if you look to the left of your command prompt, there's a parentheses with the name of the virtual environment, or venv. I'm going to run pip install Jinja 2. And this is going to reach out to the pip library, grab the Jinja one, and install it within here. It says you're using this one, but the other one, okay, that's fine. I will just grab this and upgrade. Great. All right, so the idea here is that we want everything within your application to be single responsibility. Right now, you have server, which is doing everything. It's building the HTML, it's listening for responses, it's parsing through the request to see if it's a particular URI. So this server.py is more or less doing everything. Request, we've taken some of the issues out and we put it inside of here, but more or less server is doing everything. And the idea here is I don't want one file to be the single point of failure because while this is a very small, this is very, very small right now, once you get to a larger application, this particular file might be like 8,000 lines long if you put everything inside of one file. So instead of having one place where you have to look through 8,000 lines of code and how does this affect something else, which affects something else, I'm going to have specific folders with specific actions that they're going to take. So I'm going to create a templates directory. And notice that the use of the word templates kind of dictates what's inside of there. It's just going to be HTML templates. And we're going to create a template for our time route, which is going to be templates/time.html. And we're going to copy and paste this code inside of there. So at the same level as request and server, I'm going to create a new folder called templates. Within there, I'm going to create a file called time.html. I've got time.html, it's just a blank file over here. I'm going to copy and paste all of this inside. And we'll go over what everything is. So all of this code is nothing more than me going bang and then hitting tab and everything else comes out. So bang, tab, we installed Emmet on the first day as a package that VS Code gives to you for free. So instead of typing out doc type is HTML and head and body and all that, all you have to do is press bang and press tab, and then it'll fill out the basically a boilerplate HTML template for everybody.
Boilerplate is just a general starting point foundation.
What's that?
Boilerplate is like a general.
Yeah, boilerplate is my term for just like the starting point. Yeah. You were saying?
You said we installed it in this thing, so we always have that?
Yep, now you always have that built into VS Code. So I'm just going to paste in what we have, but most of this code doesn't, it's not magic. I just press bang tab and I changed a few things and put it inside your curriculum. So just reading top to bottom, this first line declares that this entire file is going to be an HTML file. This is the HTML actual code itself. There's a head which contains all the metadata. This is the things that your browser needs in order to read it and parse through it correctly. And then the body is the thing that shows up. The title right over here on line 6 is the thing that will show up at the very top right over here. So I called it, what time is it right now? And if you get that joke, I like Bojack as well. All right. So you'll notice that when you take a look here, it's all pretty self-explanatory until you get to this line, which is the time is now, God, what is that? So remember what I said, Jinja is an HTML template that allows you to take Python variables and interpolate them over here. So you can do all the calculations behind the scenes. You can grab stuff from the database. You can figure out all the variables that you need, and then you can pass them into the template. So what this is saying is there's a variable called time that was passed to me, and I'm going to interpolate it. That's these double curly braces on opposite sides. Any questions on that? So I need to pass this file into Jinja and pass in the time variable so that everything renders. So at the very top of server.py, I'm going to, from Jinja 2, which is that library that I installed, import template, which is a library that's built into Jinja. We're going to update the conditional statement to use Jinja 2. And we're basically going to replace the second part of the else if with this line of code. So first things first, since I want to use Jinja 2 inside of server.py, I'm going to go to the very top and then paste this in. So all I did was I'm saying there's a library that I'm using called Jinja 2. Inside of there, there's another library, another class called template. And then down here, all the way at the bottom, I'm going to replace this entire block with this here. All right, I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that people can actually read it. And let's see what we've got. It's more or less the same thing as before. We're importing everything up top. We're building an HTML response body that we're most likely not going to use pretty soon. We've created a server. We've bound it to localhost 9291. And we're going to have a while loop that just continuously runs. We listen for connections. We get that connection once we hear something. We parse through the request that came through. And this is the same as before. We're going to change this in just a bit. But if the URI is equal to /time, I'm going to open /templates /time. I'm going to open up that file, save it as my file, read that file, and save it as HTML from file. So again, all I'm doing on line 20 is I'm opening that particular file. Remember we did like open with CSV? We can also just open a regular file and read it. And we're just going to say myfile.read and save all the contents. Basically, I'm essentially saving all the contents found over here in time.html and putting it inside of HTML from file.
So with HTML, you don't, or is it only because you have template, you don't have to have like import, you know, you import CSV
Yep.
to read a CSV?
Yep.
Because you have template, you don't have to. So that's why I understand that.
So we are not, so I actually haven't gotten to template yet. That's here on line 22. We're not doing CSV stuff because CSV is...
Well, we don't have a CSV.
We don't have a CSV file,
It
yeah.
is a .html, so I guess that's it.
So let's put it this way. I'm going to just push this down a little bit. This block of code basically says open up this file, read it, and save that as my file.
So could we do that with a CSV?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will we import it?
But we're not using a CSV, so we're not going to import CSV.
We don't have to import CSV, we can just do that. So,
Oh, to parse through a CSV, you need to import CSV. To read a file, you don't need to import CSV. You actually don't need to import anything.
CSV is a file. I guess it's not.
CSV is an extension of a file. So .csv is like, it's like .doc is a Microsoft Word file. So .csv is a CSV file. HTML is a type of file, but so you could read a CSV file as just my file, but you won't be able to parse through it like you would a CSV file.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. The reader, the dict reader, and the CSV reader is all we need is CSV. The open, it's just standard. You can open it.
Yep. I saw another hand somewhere over here. Nope. All right, so I am just going to open up the file and save it as my file, and then read the contents of that file into this HTML from file variable. Yeah.
We're opening things, and so we can open any file with that method right here.
Correct.
With open blah, blah.
Correct.
Now, when we're actually using the read function, what is that function actually doing?
Sure, that's a great question. So Bobby's question was, this dot read here, what is that actually doing? Let's find out. So I'm going to do from IPython, import embed. So the idea to Christina was like, if I know I don't need it, I'm not going to put it in there, but until I need it, I know I'm going to need embed, and I know this is the thing that I need to put in there. Let's throw an embed right here so that we can take a look at what's going on. From here, I'm going to look, that's so small, Python server.py. No module called IPython. So that's because I'm within my virtual environment and not my full machine. Pip install IPython. All right, so we're waiting over here, and I'm going to hit /time, and it's going to be right here that I'm going to stop at line number 22. So if you'll notice, it's kind of stuck right here right now. I'm going to jump over, go to local page /time, and it's just kind of hanging out because we're stuck inside of an embed right now. So let's take a look around us. What is my file? I have no idea what that is. Let's find out. Type my file. It's a text IO wrapper. I don't know why that is the case. How come I can't read it? So when you actually open something as my file is just holding whatever you just opened. The open thing here is this particular class. But if I do myfile.read, it shows me what the contents inside of that file are. So when I say HTML from file equals myfile.read, it actually equals this whole thing. And if I do type of my file, it's a string now. It's actually a string. So my file is an text IO wrapper. I don't know what that it really does. Yeah. I know IO is enough. I was like, I don't really know what this is. A text IO wrapper. But when you do the .read function within this text IO wrapper, it actually reads the contents of the file. That's why we have to throw this line 23 in there. Good question though. Let's exit out. Let's get rid of this for right now. Let's continue on. So once we read the HTML, once we get this bit of code, we're going to pass that into the template Jinja library. From there, I'm going to create a body response, and I'm going to actually render the, I'm actually going to tell Python to render the template out to the screen. If I need to pass in anything, like any sort of variables like time, you'll notice I passed in time right here, then you need to pass it in. Otherwise, you can just do template.render, and it'll render it out to the screen. If you need to pass something in, pass it into the parentheses. And then from there, I'm going to send the connection, this body response, and encode it so that you can actually read it. Yep.
Will we pass a dictionary to render?
This is technically a dictionary. Yep. This is time equals. So it's an implicit dictionary. Yep. It is a dictionary by default. So let's just make sure that this works as we expect. Address is already in use. I really don't like this, so I'm just going to change it back. All right, so I'm going to change the port to 9292, and if all goes well, I will go inside of here, and then it'll say the time is now something. /time. This is broken. There's nothing here. Let's go back into the write-up. All right, let's break down what's happening here. We went over this. Let's make a test to /time via curl and see if we get the HTML response. So curl http localhost 9292/time. What did I do? This curl is not working. Let's delete this cache real quick. Build the server off. Get rid of this for right now because I don't need it. Now let's see if this works. Python server.py. Address is still in use. Change it to 9291. So we're working right over here. Let's try curling just slash. Next. Oops. Good call. All right, so we know that the server is listening because we have that hello world HTML that we created earlier. Let's try hitting /time, and we get that HTML that we got back. So remember that doc type, the time is now, and then whatever time is. If we try hitting this in the browser, it says it should be broken. We need to rewrite this build HTML response to get a proper response for the browser and for curl. And we want to repeat that for the slash. So if I do 9291 /time, I get nothing. And the question is, why is that? Yep.
Right now, we're sending the HTML file.
Yep. Yep. So we're missing a. So yeah, that's what Christian is correct. Right now, we're just sending HTML, but the browser won't respond properly if you don't have all this extra stuff inside of there. So we actually need to also include build HTML response. So we've got the HTML body. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do. I'll call this HTML body. And I'm going to say body response is equal to build HTML response with HTML body. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the HTML from the template, which reads the HTML file. I pass that into the body response so that I get the proper headers. And then I'm going to send that over to the connection. Kill the server. Change this to 9292. Run the server again. Jump back over, refresh on port. The time is now 2019-06-10. Sure. So when I had everything, so this is what I had before. I changed ports. So this is what I had before. I have localhost 9291 running. I'm trying to make a request to /time. Nothing works. This is broken. I'm not a fan of this. But if I try curling that same thing, I actually do get should be getting an actual response. The reason why I'm not getting a response from the server is because the reason why I'm not getting a response from the server in the browser is because I'm actually just reading the file, passing it into template, rendering the template inside of HTML, inside of body response, and sending that over. So I'm literally just sending over a string, and that's not what I want. I need to send over a fully formatted response like this. It needs to have the HTTP protocol, the reason phrase, and the status code, the type of content you're citing. That is what the browser needs in order for it to run. It's like saying, I'm going to the post office with a box and saying, send this to my mom. That doesn't help at all. You need to format it in a specific way for the post office to process it. You have to have the top left your address, and in the middle your mom's address. Only then can they actually send it. Walking up to them and saying, send this to my mom, doesn't help out in any way. So we need to format it in such a way that the browser will understand. That's what we've got up here. So what I've done is I know that this is actually the HTML. We'll call this HTML body or something. So this is the actual HTML body once I read it from the template. I need to build the response itself. So I'll call this body response. So I'm going to build the HTML response, pass in the HTML body that I read from the file, and send that whole thing back. Oh, whoops. Let me kill this. Change my port back to 9292. And then when I refresh this with 9292 /time, the time is now this particular time, which matches up over here. We've done that for one of them, this one over here, and we want to do the same thing with this file over here. So we're going to follow that same process. So right now we have just a template for time. We're going to have a template for index.html. And we're just going to do bang tab. And inside the body, we'll have an H1 that says hello world. So all I've done is I've created an extra template called index.html so that I don't have to hard code a bunch of HTML inside of here. What I'm going to do, same thing, more or less just copy this, get rid of this whole thing, and paste it inside of here. I'm not opening up /time now. I'm just going to do /index. So what I'm doing is whenever anybody makes a request to the URI just /, I'm opening up the index.html file, reading it, saving it inside of HTML from file, creating a template from it on line 20, rendering the template, but since if you take a look inside of here, I don't have any double curly braces. So I don't need to pass anything in. Yep.
Do we pass in files to Jinja render or images? Like I know we're passing the strings, but what other data types can we pass in?
I've only passed in strings. I've only read things and then passed that in. All right, so I've got the HTML body. I'm going to do the same thing again with this body response equals build HTML response with the HTML body from the template, and then send that over to the browser. Let me kill this server, change the port number. Let's see if we can visit these two things. So can we visit 9291/time, 1032, that matches up. And then can I go to just /this, and I got that hello world that we saw before.
Are we getting some extra headers in there from the way to some responses?
Are we getting extra headers? What do you mean?
Because build HTML function right now builds an HTML string and then passes that into the second part of the.
Oh yeah. So yeah, you're correct.
I mean, it works with that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, let's just change this. Why am I doing all of this stuff here? Yep. Yeah. So Nick noticed a couple things. One of them, I didn't even realize that. One of them is if you take a look inside of time.html and index.html, there is most of the HTML code that I need in there already. So I had one called whattimeisightRightNow.com as the title. And right over here it says an example page under title. So if you take a look up here, there's an example page, and that's overwriting the title from the category, from the Jinja template. So actually, I don't think I need all of this stuff. Let me get rid of this whole thing. Do I need HTML body at all? Probably not. I think I could just do, maybe I'll call this HTML body, and then put that inside of here. I think that's all I need. So we just shortened it a little bit. I am reading the HTML file, passing it into template, rendering it out, and then passing this inside of here. Let's see if this works. So there's still hello world, but then we have just some random document. And if I go to /time, what time is it right now? And the time is currently that. So we are reading things effectively. You can kind of see we've already shortened some of the code that we have here. I'm going to pause real quick and see if there are any questions up to this point. What's that? Yeah.
Code looks longer to me.
Yeah.
So you keep saying it's shorter.
Oh,
but
we're
there's
halfway.
more files
We're like a third of.
longer.
We're a third of the way through. Yeah. So right now it looks longer. It looks like it's way worse.
I mean, it looks. I get it. I get
Yeah.
what's going on, but to me, it's more stuff and more files, and I don't know what
Yes.
this is.
So right now it does look longer because we're still working through it. But by the end, this particular file should be like 8 lines long, and then all the other code should go into other files as well. Yes, it does look like, for a very simple example like this, it does look like it's more work to put it into separate files and separate folders. But once your application scales and gets larger, this one file will easily be thousands of lines of code long. And it's harder to go through one file of 8,000 lines than to look into other places that are slightly smaller.
Can we go to the index HTML? And okay, so it's no title. What it says,
It's just this document.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I'll change it to index page. I just go back and I jump over to index page.
Yeah,
That's all. Yeah, it said document because that's by default the boilerplate has document. All right, let's try to get through one more release and we'll take a break. All right, so let's see. We repeated the process for slash. We called that the index template, and we fixed up a few things. All right, so now we want to refactor. As we build more routes, we're going to have more Jinja files, and we're going to need to utilize helper methods. So what you'll notice is that we're based off of the URIs. Based off of the URIs, we're repeating a bunch of code. One of them is we're using this build HTML response. It's cool to keep it up here if you want to, but we're also doing a bunch of the same thing with this with open, and then this template is the same thing, and this HTML body is the same thing as well. So once you see repeated code, and you'll notice that lines 16 through 22 and 23 through 29 are more or less the same, we can take a little bit out one by one and try to make that into a separate method. Now, you can do two things. You can throw all of the code inside of here under server.py and just create a method for it, or you can create what's called basically like helper methods and put it in a separate file so that all the helper methods live within that file rather than this one file here. So I'm going to take the latter approach and just create a new file. What does it say? Let's create a new file, utilities.py, to house those helper methods. Okay. So I'm going to just create a new file called utilities.py. And I'm going to copy and paste all of this code over. And then I need to figure out how to basically get all this in there as well. So we can grab, okay, return myfile.read. So I'm just going to grab this get template and also put it inside of utilities.py. Flip this to the right. So my idea here is that I want to separate out as much code as I can. If it's shared, like lines 14 and 15 are identical to lines 20 and 21. The only thing that changed is the name of the file. So I'm passing an index, or I'm going to pass in time. That's what we've got here. I've got with open, F formatted string, templates /path /HTML as my file. I'm going to do return myfile.read. These two lines are pretty much the same, so I'm going to get rid of this line and this block of code. And maybe we'll call it HTML from file is equal to get template with index. And the same thing down over here, HTML from file equals get template from time. But you'll notice that these two things are very angry right now. It says, I don't know what get template is, and I don't know what build HTML response is. It used to live in this file, but now it lives in this one. So how do I bring this file's code inside of server.py? From utilities, import everything. When I save it again, it's no longer angry. Yeah.
On the downside, guys, we can just put import utilities and see it works with it. I don't know the difference.
So let's do this. Let's try just running this and making sure that works. We'll stop the server, and then we'll do import utilities, and let's see if anything happens. So I'm going to kill the server, run it again, and if all goes well, I should be able to visit this page. I do get hello world, And the real test is if I go to /time, 1040, it is currently 1040, so it does still work. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking all the unnecessary code that server doesn't need to know and passing it off to another file. That's what I put over here. All right, let's test the data science guys stuff by saying import utilities. Well, it says the server is still in use. I'm going to change it to 9292. If I refresh this page, you can kind of see it's 1041, so hopefully. Get template is not defined. Yep. So
I have no idea. We had like approximately same.
Yeah, you just put import, and I asked somebody, so you just put import, I was like,
yeah, I don't know how he made it work. The way that I would recommend it is I have import whatever as if this is built into the Python main library, you can import it. If you write your own code, like from request, import request, I like to say from this file, import this class. So I'm going to go back to the way things were. From utilities, from this file, import everything. That's the star right here. Let's just test that this one works again. /1, 1042, that works, and then just /hello world. All right, so we imported everything, we moved some stuff out, and okay, let's review this and we'll take a 5-minute break. So we got a little bit more breathing room. So we've got server.py. Actually, let's just read this. Close this out. So we're importing everything up here, creating a server, binding it to localhost 9291, and creating a loop so that it runs consistently. We listen for connections, get the connection once we hear something, and then we pass off the connection to the request class to basically parse through once we get that connection. Once we parse through it, if the URI is equal to /, we're going to run this code. And if the URI is equal to time, we're going to run this code. We get the HTML from get template. Okay, where is get template? It's not inside of here, but I see that on line 5 it says from utilities import everything. There's that get template over there. So we're sharing some code that we're bringing into this particular file. I'm doing HTML from file equals get template. I'm going to create a Jinja template from line 3 over there. Render that out. Save it as HTML body. Pass it into build HTML response, which also lives over here. Get that whole thing back, and then send it, put it inside of here. Pretty soon, this is the flow that we're working towards. Server is going to receive an HTTP request. It's going to pass the request to the request class, which is going to parse and clean it. The request gets passed to a router, and this is how Django actually works. You're going to pass the request to a router, and then that particular class is going to determine what kind of response to send back. You're going to create a response class, and then you're going to see that HTML on your browser. That's what we're going to work towards next. Let's take a 6-minute break. We'll be back at 10:50.